missile truck. A modern variant of the Russian Blackjack bomber is getting a new lease on life. The Tu-160M has improved engines, and it can carry stealth cruise missiles. The Blackjack used to be Russia's most advanced bomber, and it had exemplary specs and characteristics, but that was during the end of the Cold War. It badly needed an update to compete with the American B-2 stealth bomber and the modern US B-1B. The Blackjack has always been a huge beast of a plane. The Tu-160 Blackjack is the biggest strategic bomber in the world and the heaviest warplane ever produced. It has huge swept wings that make it look like a white swan. But there were only 35 built. Former Russian President Boris Yeltsin thought that they were too expensive, and the Russian military knew that they were costly to maintain. The Blackjack has its advantages though. It can get to the United States without refueling. The original 4 engines were also the biggest in the world. It set 44 records for speed. The Blackjack is known more as a missile carrier rather than a bomber. Its payload is usually cruise and other air-to-ground missiles. What's new with the Blackjack? In 2015, the Russians were ready for the Tu-160 to be updated as the Blackjack had become neglected over time. It took a while for the improvement to be integrated into the update. It's now called the Tu-160M with new, extremely powerful NK32-02AX engines with a gargantuan 55,000 pounds of thrust. These propelled the airplane during a reportedly successful flight test in 2020. The avionics have been replaced, according to the Russians. Communications, radar, and electronic countermeasures are all new. The airplane can now carry 12 cruise missiles. These are believed to be stealthy, and the Blackjack could use them to destroy American or NATO ground radar and surface-to-air missiles, or to blow up enemy airplanes on the ground. There are only 17 Tu-160s in service, and all are supposed to get the M upgrade. 10 new ones are on order. Is the upgraded Blackjack really that impressive? I'm not totally impressed with the updated Blackjack. It does have a great range and those stealth cruise missiles are really interesting. But it is essentially the same airplane. It's still expensive to fly and will likely be difficult to maintain. The Blackjack makes for a big target that is not stealthy. There are not enough of them to be real difference makers. The engines suck a lot of fuel. They would need fighter escorts since the Blackjack is not known for its external defenses. To be sure, the Russians have yet another upgrade that observers are speculating about. This Blackjack could then have radar-evading stealth coating around the airplane. If that comes to fruition, it would be a more significant development. Russia's Tu-160 bomber, can it strike America or sink an aircraft carrier? Russia's Tu-160 bomber, just how capable is it? A tricky challenge in defense analysis is grasping a potential adversary's own perceptions of military capabilities and limitations. It's hard not to project beliefs and assumptions from one's own strategic culture onto another country's. That can also lead one to inflate or misinterpret the effectiveness and purpose of foreign military systems already veiled in secrecy and propaganda. For that reason, a 2018 article published in a Russian military industry journal criticizing the viability of Russia's Tu-160 Blackjack strategic nuclear bomber makes for interesting reading, revealing an authentically Russian perspective on the challenges facing a key component of Moscow's airborne nuclear deterrence. The author, Andrei Gorbachevsky, who also posted a follow-up article replying to criticisms of his argument, is a radar specialist with experience managing the development of air defense technology going back to the 1980s. His take shouldn't be taken as the final word on the Tu-160 Blackjack's effectiveness after all. Even highly informed defense experts disagree all the time on the utility of various technologies and tactics. Nonetheless, his piece opens a window to internal debates regarding Russia's nuclear deterrence priorities and offers insight as to how North America's air defenses appear from the attacker's perspective. Is the Tu-160 Blackjack an expensive dinosaur? As profiled in greater detail here in 1945, the Tupolev Tu-160, codenamed Blackjack by NATO, is a huge swing-wing bomber capable of surging to up to twice the speed of sound and traversing huge distances across the globe cruising at subsonic speeds. The Blackjack entered service in the closing years of the Cold War, and Russia has invested considerable resources in rebuilding its small fleet, presently counting 16 or 17 flyable aircraft. The Tu-160's primary mission was, and remains, to lob long-range nuclear-armed cruise missiles at high-value targets in the United States, providing a global second strike capability in case Russia's land-based nuclear forces are largely destroyed by an adversary's first strike. Secondarily, Tu-160s could assail U.S. Navy carrier task forces. Gorbachevsky's article was in response to Moscow's announced plans to spend the equivalent of over $2.1 billion assembling 10 additional modernized Tu-160 M2 bombers, with total production supposedly aimed at 50 additional aircraft. He believes this is a fool's errand, especially once high lifetime operating costs are factored in. Due to its radar cross-section of 10 to 15 square meters, he warns, even with the presence of electronic warfare systems, it won't be possible to hide such a conspicuous target as the Tu-160 in the future. Though the Tu-160 M2 model is receiving a modernized electronic warfare system, Gorbachevsky estimates it would have to be 10 times more powerful than its current 1980s-era Baikal jammer to be effective against contemporary jam-resistant active electronically scanned array (AESA) radars on U.S. fighters. That amount of power would necessitate increased electrical generation and weight. He compares the Tu-160 unfavorably to the similar, but smaller US B-1B Lancer bomber, arguing the Soviet design's much faster supersonic sprint is a poor trade-off for the latter's smaller radar cross-section, RCS, which also requires a less powerful electronic warfare system for self-defense. Any strategic bomber flies the vast majority of the route at subsonic speed, at altitudes of about 10 kilometers, 32,800 feet. Flight at maximum speed, Mach 2.05, of the Tu-160 can be used only at around 1% of the total length of transit. Consequently, the maximum speed mode can only be used for a single separation from pursuing enemy fighters. Apocalypse via the Arctic. Which approach would Russian mission planners assign to Tu-160s for nuclear strikes? In Gorbachevsky's evaluation, flying westward over the Atlantic is impractical due to a combination of NATO air defense surveillance and balloon radars overlooking the U.S. coastline. A Pacific approach would be hampered by limited basing options, and too many American bases close to the points of departure. Conventional strikes over Europe would also be impractical in Gorbachevsky's view. The density of NATO radars and fighters is so high that the Tu-160 can penetrate the area only under the cover of a large number of its own fighters, and then only where there are no long-range air defense systems. That leaves a trajectory over the Arctic Circle as the most viable path, at least until the bomber approaches a chain of long and medium-range surveillance radars stretching 2,300 miles between Alaska and Labrador, Canada. Though Gorbachevsky describes the chain as the DEW line, for distant early warning, it's been designated the North Warning System, NWS, after receiving an upgrade in 1985 to 1993. Taking on carriers. The Tu-160 has a secondary mission as a long-range maritime strike platform carrying up to 24 Kh-15 anti-ship ballistic missiles with a range of 187 miles that plunge down towards targets at Mach 5. However, Gorbachevsky assumes the use of slower, surface-skimming anti-ship cruise missiles, not Kh-15s, which might mean the Soviet-era weapon has been retired. Again, he doesn't rate the Tu-160's odds highly in a contest with a U.S. carrier task force due to the latter's multi-layered air defenses, including Super Hornet fighters, E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft, and escorting Arleigh Burke-class destroyers disposing of dozens of air-to-air missiles and powerful radars that can draw fire away from the carrier. Thanks to the Hawkeye aircraft's forward presence, he estimates an approaching Tu-160 might be detected 800 kilometers, 500 miles, away from a carrier, while the Tu-160 would only detect the carrier from 400 kilometers, 250 miles, away within interception range of Super Hornet fighters on Combat Air Patrol, CAP.